Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
Isn't there a subtitle like Why Politics and Religion Divide Good People?
Why good people
There we go.
disagree about politics and religion.
Yeah. And that's brought up in your video about
Persuasion.
Yeah,
and that's not even the half of it in my video. That's a very basic, overview of it. Because the book starts with talking about the elephant and the rider. Mm-hmm. And the elephant and the rider is about your emotional, impulsive reaction to things. And the rider is your rationality, assessment of a situation kind of thing. And he just talks about how the elephant, the emotion, is much stronger. 99% of 100%.
Then we think, we assume we're just in charge.
We assume we're, rational, controlling everything. But he says, that's not true. A lot of it is you actually coming in with all of your bias and he describes it as moral taste buds of things, and your reaction to that will immediately color how you see facts and opinions and all information. So the reason in Persuasion why it's so important to establish common ground is if you're just shouting at, a no face on the internet, there's no connection with the 99%.
The elephant.
The elephant at all, right? And so everybody's yelling at each other, trying to be rational, but they never establish any commonality between each other. It's just these strangers who think they're, holier than thou or smarter than the other person. But it's just basically words that are not connecting with either side.
And usually the assumption is if I can just put together the perfect argument, I can be as rude or distasteful as I want, and they will just come over to my side because of my,
Your incredible intelligence.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a small subset of the population who is looking for that, who is like, oh, I only like really insightful, INCITE, insight, people who incite anger and things like that with truth. But in terms of the general population, convincing people is got to get on the same side first, whether that even be something like we share the same taste in TV shows.
And this would imply that either we need to change the way that we talk about things like politics or religion in his book, or that we've just decided that we don't care about convincing each other and we're just kind of shouting within our tribe.
Exactly, and that's also a big part of the book too, which is sort of because of social intuitionist theory, which argues that our ability to reason has nothing to do with finding truth, it has to do with bringing people into our group. It's the same idea. It's, I'm only saying this because I want to tighten my own tribe.
Right.
It has very little to do with finding the truth between tribes.
Right.
So that's the social intuitionist theory, and that's why when you read it, it's kind of, it's sad. Because you're like, wow, it's really hard to argue across these tribal divides.
Yeah.
Because their intuitions are different. So much so that they don't know they're different.
I think one of the most interesting parts that I got to in that book was he starts talking about these post hoc reasons for justifying your biases and believing that those reasons are built on some level of absolute truth. And it makes sense of why on both sides of the fence there are things that we'll defend about our group that are kind of morally reprehensible. And so it seems to me like what seems to be a hypocritical stance actually is just this playing out exactly how you'd expect it to.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
It just plays out. When you see all controversy on the internet, if you put it through that framework, you understand why there's so much hypocrisy in politics and religion. Because the rider's there to justify behavior, regardless of whether it fits into a set of principles. It's simply there to justify what has been done.
Mm-hmm.
And people are really good at it.
And it's interesting to me, something I realize is actually the smarter you are, the better you are at fooling yourself. And like, the more sophisticated your arguments can get, and the more you can obfuscate the fact that you are actually serving this, purpose. I think
100%.
there's this thing like, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. Anyway, that's what I think of. Or ideologies or moral taste buds have people.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Like this, I think the smarter people tend to be able to justify pretty much anything they want, because they're able to create these really highfalutin arguments, like whenever they need to.
Right.
You know.